But I'll tell you a story I heard from, secondhand from James Irwin, who was an astronaut. He basically said that when he was up on the moon, he had a vision given to him of four. I mean, just speculating. So that's the scenario.
Yeah, it sounds interesting.
Yeah,
because
I mean,
hypothetically, if we don't know if all this technology is hidden by intelligence and the private contractors working with them who are
yep.
by extension therefore intelligence, then we don't know if they're working on all this, and that's why these bombs haven't gone off. We don't know if in Russia, which obviously has had political changes over time, but countries like Russia or China are working on that. I guess it would make sense, but you bring up the nuclear point, which always comes up, and it always has to, because it's pretty heavy. When you think about it, if that's the deal. But my friend Jesse Michaels points out that a lot of he was the guy I was showing you right before.
Oh yeah, and I know Jesse.
You know him personally?
Yeah, I've talked to him on the phone a couple times and traded emails.
You gotta do some content with him.
I'd love to.
Yeah,
I would. I want to.
But yeah, I'll talk to him. But he always mentions, he's like, when you're talking about the military guys on these nuclear bases who witness this stuff, these are dudes who have to report if they took an ibuprofen in the morning. So you're talking about the most sober guys that exist in this country, arguably, and they're the ones who report to see these things. And it gets weird when you start talking with Lou Elizondo. I don't know. Have you heard his take on the nukes thing?
No, I remember I watched a little bit of your interview with him.
Yeah. So he does not necessarily think that the potential aliens fucking with our nukes is benevolent. He thinks it could be malevolent. And I said, why? And basically what he was getting into is they've been turning them on, in addition to turning them off sometimes. They're showing us they go both ways. And my retort to that would be, isn't that to just kind of show us that they're in control here, and that they want to do this, and therefore, if they really wanted to set one off, I mean, my guys, it's been 80 years, they haven't done it yet. They could do it in a second if they have that power.
I agree totally. I mean, I think it's far more of your systems are weak and ineffective. Yeah, we can turn them on and off. You need to pay more attention. You need to be very careful with these things. You don't want to have an inadvertent issue and have them blow up or launch one and create a problem. I mean, when we exploded it in July of 45, I believe that the ETs were still cruising around, but the whole universe suddenly took notice. Oh my goodness, this little kindergarten planet just got the nuke, and we need to pay more attention to them. They're on a trajectory. It was an inflection point. I mean, this is sort of classic thinking about, how the civilization unfolds.
Yeah, I used to have in my old studio in my parents' house, I had a picture. I have it out there, but it's not in the studio, where there were two pictures. One was an explosion test at Bikini Atoll.
Oh, yeah.
And then the other one below it was a redo of the Sistine Chapel, Adam and God's hand, but the hand of God is actually a robot hand. And the reason I like this dichotomy, because the bottom is what I get concerned about with AI and things like that, potentially taking over our being and how we are. That's scary to me, and I think we need to not do that. And the reason I had the Bikini Atoll on the top is because we dropped these two bombs on Japan after getting to this science in 1945, and in the almost 80 years now since then, the world has had all these weapons. And yes, we've tested them in places like Bikini Atoll. These tests happen, in some respects, you could say, all the time from different countries. But no one has ever used it on each other. And the idea that in a world filled with insane egos, dictators, tyrants, people who get into, let's call it what it is, pissing matches with each other and just aren't afraid to, play score. And the score is how many bodies does your country lose versus mine. The fact that we've never used that feels like some sort of divine intervention. Now, could that just be wherever God is up there, just somehow being like, yeah, listen, I know that fucking that Putin guy's not great, but like he's not going to press the button, or could it be, some intervention from
Yeah,
these?
it certainly could be. But I'll tell you a story I heard from, secondhand from James Irwin, who was an astronaut. And he basically said that when he was up on the moon, he had a vision given to him of 4 nukes going off in the Middle East, and I just okay, that's sort of his input, and you look at today, with what's going on with Iran.
When did he have this vision?
I think Apollo 11, 12, whatever, he was on the moon.
Okay.
James Irwin, he's one of the first astronauts.
So years ago.
Yeah, it's in the 60s.
Yeah.
But I think he wasn't, and he told the story to several people, including my friend Rick Broom, who told me, and I look today, here we are in October 2nd of 2024, and the Middle East could easily go a couple nukes. And I think that might be the, I hope it doesn't happen, but I think that it's probably going to take 1 or 2 nukes going off in hostility again to remind the Earth that we need to get rid of them.
You think that? You think
I just think it's a scenario that's they're planning for, and the question is what would happen.
What scares me is the guys like let's put a time period on it too, but we'll expand that. The guys like the Curtis LeMays of the world, okay, back then, they believed in the 240 to 60 theory. And that's definitely not what they called it, but I'm just using what were alleged to be their quotes behind the scenes, which is that, well, if Russia hit us, we'd lose 60, but we'd hit them and they'd lose 240. We win by 180.
Yeah.
Right? And so, yeah, we look at that during an era of people where, they probably blew off a president's head. But who's to say it doesn't take more than a few people thinking like that, right? There can be thousands of great people in the government, and I have no doubt that there are. And then you just have a few people in positions of power who just fucking suck and have that thought, right?
Yeah.
And then suddenly, to your point, maybe they put that into practice, if you will.
I mean, what I thought was interesting was Irwin's comment that it was the Middle East, and we're sitting there with Iran. Okay, I find it impossible to believe that Iran hasn't purchased a suitcase nuke out of the vast missing stockpile of suitcase nukes from the Russian government, and that they have a few bombs, and if they were to set one off, there'd be a retaliation. And people would go, well, this is not a good idea anymore. Is it sort of, you can see a limited exchange in my mind. Not that the U.S. and Russia or other major powers would get involved. So but as Robert Salas has often said, there's 20,000 nukes on planet Earth, and if they go off, you better be underground for a few decades.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
just
scary.
It is scary. It is scary.
Well, it's to your point, it's strange times we're living in right now, especially. It feels like a lot of the rest of the world is on the brink, which means we're also on the brink because we're a world power. Mm-hmm. And by proxy, everyone's involved in these different conflicts that are going on. And
Mm-hmm.
whether it be in Ukraine or in the Middle East, it's definitely, it definitely makes you have to look at the simpler questions about, us as a collective rather than us as these stories that we call borders.
Right.
With all these countries that pretend to not be a part of the of the same human race at the highest level of stuff. And to me, like the highest level of stuff is, oh, don't nuke each other.
Right.
You know?
And it's interesting you sort of philosophize on that. I'll bring it back to the Majestic documents. There's one of the only sort of think pieces in the Majestic document trove is a memo written by Einstein and Oppenheimer. And it's a 4-page piece that's on the majesticdocuments.com website. But it asks the question of, can you settle on planet Earth? Can the ETs settle on planet Earth? And his response, or Einstein's words, were to the effect of, if planet Earth is devoid of political unity, they would have the right to colonize, but not on traditional lines. And it goes on for a paragraph or so. But I thought that was interesting in that, here's Einstein being posed with this question of colonization of planet Earth by alien species and what to do about it, how to address it, what to think about it. And that's, I thought it went to your point.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So-
And that's the hard part about this conversation. On one end of the spectrum, you can get the guys like Neil deGrasse Tyson who say we're not interesting at all, and they don't want to study us. And sometimes Michio Kaku, who's been on this show, will go there. Now, he's obviously a lot more open on some of the other stuff, but he'll be like, would they really try to study a squirrel with a nut like we would? My thought is maybe. Because like sometimes I'll sit there, let's use the squirrel example. Sometimes I'll sit there and there's a million squirrels outside, right? I don't sit there and watch most of them, but one day a squirrel does some weird shit on like the telephone lines and I'm like, oh, wow. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
So who's to say you don't get an alien once in a while going, oh, wow, look at that.
Well, I can guarantee you that I can probably find 5 squirrel PhDs that specialize in nothing but squirrels. And the gray squirrel, the brown squirrel, all of the squirrels, all squirrels around the world, there's a huge body of literature on squirrels. I suspect that there's probably more literature on squirrels than there is on ufology.
Watching the video, guys. If you haven't already subscribed, please smash that subscribe button and check out this clip's full podcast episode by clicking here